You know, the first hour of this movie, with the exception of that very, very strong beginning, is such a slow slog where so little is actually happening. You know, it was very reminiscent to me of another Conjuring verse movie. It was reminiscent of the first Annabelle movie, where Annabelle refused to get off her ass and do anything. It's like, come on, Annabelle, just get up, just haunt me, just please. You know, she's put in the least amount of work than any ghost, any monster, any creature, any entity, any interdimensional, hentai being, before her. Like, she has been able to make hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars in all these films, and she does it by sitting on her little porcelain ass doing nothing, chat. You know, I'll give Valak this. Valak does the same shit. I'm going to hide in the shadows until someone flashes a light at me and go, bah! And I'm going to drag you into like some cupboard or closet or something, or I'll burn you alive. Like, Valak at least is proactive. You got to give Valak that. You got to give the nun that. But my God, Annabelle, you barely do anything.
Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class on the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon, where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching. Enjoy the video.
We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to my review for The Nun 2. The Nun Part 2, chat, The Nunning. There's a lot more nuns. Actually, it's just the same nun, chat. She's doing the same exact things that you've seen her do a million other times, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I have to go ahead and explain to you what the general plot is, the synopsis of this movie. And in 1956 France, a priest is violently murdered by supernatural forces. And Sister Irene, from the original movie, begins to investigate. She once again comes face to face with a powerful evil known as Valak, the demon nun. Listen, I'll be very honest at the top. I have been mixed, to say the least, on many of the Conjuring verse movies. I enjoy the first Conjuring movie, and I think the second Annabelle movie is the best in the franchise, the prequel-sequel directed by David F. Sandberg. I really enjoyed that film. And there are probably a handful of others that I thought were also entertaining or just fine. But honestly, I think the majority of the films in the franchise are quite dull or even terrible. The first Nun, which was a spin-off of the second Conjuring movie, Conjuring 2, to me is one of the absolute worst entries in the franchise, and pretty much features everything I hate about supernatural ghost movies: annoying characters, unnecessarily long and drawn-out running time, constant, consistent jump scares, and just all the same ghost tropes we've seen a million times in 1,000 other ghost movies. Now, this sequel has all those things in spades. I'm not going to lie to you about that. It has all of those things. And I'll touch on those things in just a bit. But I do want to start out and praise several things that I think actually worked in this movie that certainly elevate it over the original film, the first Nun. Tessa Farmiga, I hope I'm saying her name correctly, chat. Tessa Farmiga, who is the lead of the spin-off series and plays Sister Irene, I think is giving this film her all and does the absolute best with the material that she's given. She's the one you're the most invested in, because she's the one that has fought against, Valak, the nun before, and she knows her stuff. She knows how this guy, this girl, whatever, operates, chat. She's like, okay, I know what you got going on here. I'll go ahead and battle her, no doubt about it. She's not dumb, and she's typically not doing dumb things in the movie, which is nice since the majority of the characters are written to be a bunch of dum-dums in the film and do dumb things because they're told to. There are also some interesting visuals in the movie as well. there's this sequence where we have this wall of magazines and newspapers that are all like flipping across a wall that's like really cool, and it's showing like different images and things, and it's like, oh, it's meant to scare you. I think it's kind of spoiled though in the trailers, sadly. But again, it is a great visual. And it's very ominous, and it's something clever. It's like, I haven't seen something like this before. It's like, that was unique. Who would have thought that in a Conjuring verse movie they would do something unique that would actually stand out from so many other ghost movies, the dozens and dozens of ghost movies that, we seemingly get every couple of years. Also, I have to praise the film for this. The film is surprisingly violent, and you do have like several characters who are dispatched in a rather graphic way. Like this film opens up with a pretty violent death. I was like, oh, okay, here we go. What a strong start. What's the rest of the movie going to look like? Oh, sadly, certainly for that first hour, it is not as interesting as those first 5 minutes, which is disappointing. Outside of those few things, the movie does everything you expect a Conjuring verse film to do. Wash, rinse, repeat, over and over and over again. It's filled to the brim with so many unnecessary jump scares that eventually you become numb to it after a while. You just stop caring about everyone involved, since they're about to be spooked by Valak, by the nun, or another character who just goes, oh, sorry, didn't mean to scare you. You also have a whole subplot with this little shy girl named Sophie who's at a boarding school in France, where, hey, chat, guess what? Guess what's happening to her? You guessed it right. She's being horrifically bullied by all the mean girls at the boarding school. And listen, this is the thing that's across so many other movies and all other genres. I am just sick of film bullies that are just there to create like a faux conflict for our characters. It's like, well, we don't want to, play our hand too early with the monster, the creature, the entity, the villain. So let's throw in some like side villains where they're just being assholes for the sake of being assholes to these characters. And I'm just like, why are all these bullies just like so psychotic and psychopathic? It's like, can we think of like a new thing, like a new trope to have our characters endure, conflict, other than just constantly having to regurgitate the same type of bullies, whether they be male or female in these movies. Like, I want to move past that. It's like, not every horror film, or not every other horror film, needs to have like a Stephen King class bully. Like, that's the S-tier bully chat in a movie, where those bullies are psychotic. They will not only beat you up, they'll scar you. It's like, what are you doing? They'll do everything. Even like, you have like an S-tier Stephen King bully, and then you have like the A and B tier, and even the A and B tier going like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you're going way too far. Like, you can stop it. And this movie has these bullies who are cool because that's what they're written to be. And I'm not saying that, of course there's bullies in real life and everything. Kids are bullied, but it's just a thing that we constantly see in all these movies. And I just wish that, maybe we could have a shy kid. Maybe the shy kid has some shy friends too, and they could be shy together. How about that? Let's go in that direction. Like, hey, throw me for a loop and go like, oh, maybe the shy kid actually has some friends, and then, they go on this adventure, and they try to, protect themselves, and maybe one of them dies, and you actually feel bad. She's like, oh, that little shy nerd didn't deserve to die, but that's what happens to shy little nerds. They get got sometimes, chat. So let's not constantly regurgitate the same tropes. Let's do something else, right? But that's not what this film does. Well, actually, you know what? I'll say this. No, it doesn't do anything new. I thought for a second, I was like, oh, the magazine thing. Well, other than that, it doesn't really do anything new. And that's the thing, Chad. Like, this movie, it does nothing new. But, like, even worse than that, it doesn't do anything like that interesting either, outside of maybe, like, a couple of things I mentioned earlier. The first hour of this movie, with the exception of that very, very strong beginning, is such a slow slog where so little is actually happening. It was very reminiscent to me of another Conjuring verse movie. It was reminiscent of the first Annabelle movie, where Annabelle refused to get off her ass and do anything. It's like, come on, Annabelle, just get up, just haunt me, just please. She's put in the least amount of work than any ghost, any monster, any creature, any entity, any interdimensional, hentai being, before her. Like, she has been able to make hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars in all these films, and she does it by sitting on her little porcelain ass doing nothing, chat. I'll give Valak this. Valak does the same shit. I'm going to hide in the shadows until someone flashes a light at me and go, bah! And then I'm going to drag you into like some cupboard or closet or something, or I'll burn you alive. Like, Valak at least is proactive. You got to give Valak that. You got to give the nun that. But my God, Annabelle, you barely do anything except in the sequel prequel. That was the one time where Annabelle's like, all right, it's my first time. Okay, let's do this. And then after that, she's been coasting. She's been coasting the entire time. So I will give Valak that. Valak is proactive. Valak does kill, at least, after that first hour. It takes a lot of time to get going after that first hour. And then we get into some killings, and then we get into hauntings and things. But again, it's the same stuff we've seen time and time again, not only in the Conjuring verse movies, but across this subgenre, chat, that is the ghost movie. It's like, also another thing too, I gotta say, like, this movie is way too long. This movie is almost 2 hours. It's like an hour and 50 minutes, hour 55 minutes. And there is so much material in this film that you can easily cut out. And the thing is, it's so weird because we spend so much time with these characters, and yet it's just them kind of regurgitating exposition, or them just reminding us like what happened in because when did The Nun come out? The first one wasn't like 2018, right? It's a few years ago. And, critically maligned, but it made a lot of money and it was cheap to make and everything. But, I would guess a lot of people probably forgot many of the details of The Nun, with the exception of the nun. And the exception of Valak, of course. And so they spent a lot of time just kind of catching up with some of these characters from the last movie and go like, oh, yeah, that's you. And oh, yeah, you. And the nun's inside you, I guess. And, they do a lot of that. And I was just like, okay, I kind of remember this. We don't have to spend so much time, but they do. They end up spending so much time, but it's not the type of interesting character development I think you would want for a protagonist or even an antagonist. It's just like, hey, remember this, remember that, and it's like, okay. And that's what they do in this movie. Certainly in the first hour, like arguably the first half, and they got some spoops, they got some scary sequences in between. Most of it's jump scares, but it's just not enough, Yes, this movie is probably better than the first Nun. Sure, I do think so. It helps that the original film is one of the worst, if not the worst film in the franchise that I've seen. I haven't seen all of them, but of the ones that I've seen, this and Annabelle, the first Annabelle, are kind of neck and neck. The original Nun and Annabelle are neck and neck for me. But there are other horror films this year, hell, other ghost movies this year that managed to do everything better than The Nun 2 in 2023. I mean, look at films like Evil Dead Rise, which kind of is a ghost movie. You have these evil spirits. You have these deadites that are possessing human bodies and making them do horrible things to themselves and to others. Most recently, chat, another one of my favorite movies this year, Talk to Me, which is like, all right, A24, it's like, love A24. I think they're great. They make a lot of interesting stuff, but it's a ghost film. They managed to do new things within the ghost genre that made it refreshing. The idea of having addiction be a major theme in a ghost film, and also kind of playing around with exorcism tropes and making that interesting and that little difference. Like, look at what this film did here. Both of those films, Evil Dead Rise, which I think definitely breathed new life into the Evil Dead franchise and probably acted as a gateway to the series for new viewers. And then you have something like Talk to Me, which does something completely original with the genre itself. With the subgenre itself. It's like, these movies are great, but The Nun 2 doesn't do anything in any capacity as interesting or innovative as those two films. Now, again, I'm not saying that every horror film or that every ghost movie needs to do something completely original every time. It's like, no. That's like, listen, you want to do the same things that others have done in the past? Sure. But then if you're going to do that, then you're going to have to, you're going to have to make the villain interesting. You're going to have to make the characters interesting. You're going to have to invest me in their story if I'm going to see familiar things. And they don't do that either. With the exception maybe of Farmiga, of the young Farmiga in the film. Of the films that I've seen this year, especially when it comes to the horror genre, this is one of the worst ones. And I recommend watching those other horror films that I mentioned, or at the very least, waiting until this hits streaming if you are curious, if you are actually invested in the Conjuring verse series. Because listen, you know, at the end of the day, like, this is one of the most financially successful film franchises, like, right now. They've been able to do, like, a lot of entries. You know, it's created by, you know, James Wan, and, you know, it's been able to proliferate and then do different things. They set up, I'll tell you right now, they set up another movie in the franchise, you know, going for it. It's like, all right, here we go. So, you know, they're not stopping these movies. They're not going to stop making these movies. They're too financially successful. But I don't know. I just wish they could be as good as the first Conjuring movie, or even the second Annabelle film, that prequel sequel. They just did something a little bit different. Or they at least, you know, like the first Conjuring movie, where even though it's doing all the familiar stuff that we've seen before, and I know that the Warrens themselves were con artists. You know, they were liars. They were professional liars. But the fictional versions of them, played by Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson, like, you like them. They have charm, they have chemistry, like, they work well together. There's no doubt about that, you know. And so seeing them interact with all this ghost stuff, that is interesting, you know. Even in the weakest of the Conjuring films, which I personally think is 2, like, they still have their wholesome moments that make you feel invested, right? And like in Annabelle's just like, Annabelle got off her ass, okay, for the first time, and sadly for the last time. She got off her ass, and she was doing some crazy shit in that movie. And you liked it. And it was also kind of like poking fun at ghost movies too, and like the horror genre itself. And, you know, it had some charismatic characters that stood out among all the other Conjuring verse, like, human characters. So that was nice. But the Nun 2 doesn't have anything that doesn't do it. It doesn't have that. It has none of those things. And again, you know, even with Taissa Farmiga, in which she is the best thing about it, there's just not enough material for her to have as a meaty role as her older sister, as Vera Farmiga. And so that's disappointing. So, yep, I know the movie's gonna make a lot of money, no doubt about that. You know, in terms of its competition, it doesn't really have any, chat, and people are starting to hanker for some more spooky horror films, you know, with October quickly approaching, chat. You know, I mean, September is basically October Eve, if you think about it. So, you know, it's going to do well. It's going to do well. It's probably going to drop off considerably after its first weekend. And I wouldn't be shocked by that, because, you know, I don't think there's a lot there that would necessitate another watch to begin with. But hey, again, if you are interested, wait until VOD. You don't need to see this in the theater. And, you know, maybe that will entertain you. Maybe, all right, if you're a Conjuring verse fan, you like it. But if you're someone like me, if you're someone that is sick of a lot of ghost movies and is tired of those tired tropes, and you can move on to something else. You can watch better horror movies that came out this year. But that's my thoughts on The Nun 2, The Nunning. What about you guys? What did you think of The Nun 2? Let me know.
I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.